Hello, this is Anthony. Let's walk and talk. So I decided to come up here on the rooftop to do a video because as I was walking through the city, stuff was coming to me, but I just didn't feel like I was getting a place where it was quiet enough. And then I thought, well, hey, on top of the building, you can kind of get a bird's eye view of the environment that I currently find myself in. And it's a great opportunity to talk about new beginnings. But we're going to talk about new beginnings from a different perspective today. We're going to talk about new beginnings from the perspective of something we have a lot of conversation about. And that is about the programmed you, the understanding that has been, that I've tried to present, that 95% of you is programmed by the time you're in your mid-30s. So we're going to talk specifically on that. And we're going to talk about that really from a very, more of a scientific level. I was blessed to catch a podcast to listen to while I was out enjoying the day. And this podcast was really talking a lot about, I think we'll go have a seat over here. This podcast is really talking a lot about the way and the reasons people do the things they do, and how difficult that it can be to just simply try to be mindful or live a quote-unquote conscious life, because the programming goes so absolutely deep that even while you're thinking for the 5%, you're still being run in the background by the 95%. And he talked about a lot of different ways to move through this. They use muscle testing, which, I can do a video on that if people have questions. Certainly it's a modality that I was introduced to many years ago. They do, kind of like a reprogramming in the evening. When you're in your theta waves, more, right before you go to bed. Sometimes listening to, tapes and things before you go to bed, or, being very intentional about what you watch before you go to sleep. Not just falling asleep in front of the television, because that is a lot of damage can be done there. And in fact, a lot of where you're currently existing at from a program perspective, when you fall asleep in front of a TV, a lot of times what can happen is that can actually mirror your programming, depending on what kind of programs you are consuming at that point. So he talked a lot about some of these ways to kind of overcome the programming. But then there's also other things that became very interesting to me, and very, I began to talk to AI about it. And I asked AI about a lot about ways of overcoming this programming, and like where I find myself in my current situation and whatnot. And the interesting part is that it talked about my walkabout, and we've talked about this is kind of the journey I'm on right now, on walkabout, just kind of experiencing different places. And a lot of times I've been I'm only in a location for maybe a week or two at a time, and then I'm on somewhere else. And I talked about how that can be a pattern disruptor. And because it's a pattern disruptor, it doesn't allow for the subconscious mind to get locked in on a routine. So the fact that, for instance, I can wake up in the morning and maybe have a healthy routine that I enjoy. I'll see if it feels a little noisy here too. A healthy routine that I can enjoy, like journaling. That kind of a routine helps to stabilize the environment. But the fact that every day that I wake up and I'm in a new room, I'm in a new city or a new part of the city with a different vibe, what actually happens is it breaks that pattern of familiarity. So it doesn't allow the subconscious mind to lock in on any one thing. So even things that are going on in my life, or things that I'm having to overcome and whatnot, it essentially helps to break up and bypass some of the programming that created that situation, if that makes sense. And it got me to thinking a lot about this programming, because you see, one of the things that he had presented was, and this scientist talked about, his past, his childhood. And again, I understand, programming it's not your fault. There's nothing you can do about it. You see, the vast majority of programming occurs between the ages of 0 and 7. So strictly based on the family that you were born to and based on the relationship between your parents really dictates a lot of what your programming is. And that is the stuff that you have to realize is not you. That's the stuff that you need to really think about, what actually benefits you and what does not benefit you. I never even thought about it until he had brought it up. He said, I'd had relationship after relationship and they all kept failing. And he said, at first I didn't understand why I kept failing at these relationships. But he said, then, I started to think about it and realize when I look at my parents, it was obvious as to why these relationships were never working. It was obvious to me why these relationships kept failing, because the programming that I had gotten when I was a child from a dysfunctional couple set me up to continue to search out people who would meet that dysfunction. And it also put me into situations where action reaction. If someone acted similar to some manner in which maybe his parents had acted as a child, he immediately had a reaction, and the reaction was always similar to something that he experienced as a child, that he had seen or absorbed. He talked a lot about being 0 to 7, people not understanding. It's like you're in a state of super learning or super intelligence, meaning everything that's happening to you at that age, you are essentially recording. Not now where you're interacting with, you are just recording. And that purpose of recording is really to supercharge you into being able to actually grow and learn and evolve and then survive in the environment. So there's purpose behind it. The problem with that is that all the programming that gets crammed into your brain at those ages, that you're getting generational trauma, you're getting your parents' childhood trauma, you're getting trauma from the environment that you're currently existing in, you're getting trauma from the relationship, you're getting trauma from brothers and sisters and friends and their families and parents, and all these things you're getting pushed into your psyche. And it was interesting, he actually used I believe his name's Robert Kiyosaki, the gentleman who wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He used him as a perfect example. He said his book is the exact example of that, where you have, he had two sets of programming in terms of how he reacted to money, and he was able to intake and understand both practices, and ultimately understood why the quote-unquote rich dad gave him the advice and why it was better advice than the quote-unquote poor dad, which is what helped propel him into success financially. So when you look at all these things, one of the big things that he talked about was he really talked about reprogramming yourself and how to understand about it and how to start overcoming the negative talk. And it's not just a matter of overcoming the negative talk, it's about understanding and understanding why that talk is there, and really discussed the reason why overcoming it is so important. You see, he said something that I have believed since this journey started for me. You see, most people view this life as hell. They view this life as you're put in hell on earth and you're just meant to survive. And then those who are religious think, oh, I've got a better life afterwards. But what he discovered is something much like I've discovered. When you can stay present and you can overcome and override a lot of that programming, you don't have to live in hell on earth. It becomes heaven on earth. You see, even through my most difficult times, and I've had a few, especially in the last 6-8 months, I've had a few difficult times, you still recognize that life is beautiful. You still recognize that these things are meant for you to better understand and love self. You still understand that life is magical. You still understand that this is heaven on earth. That you offer a unique perspective that nobody in the history of man has offered, because there's been nobody in the history of man that has lived and had the experiences that you've had. And the value in being able to understand this 95% of programming and reprogramming it can bring you to that happiness, can bring you to that heaven on earth in your life, in your work situation, in your relationships, and all things. You just have to be willing to step out of the familiar and start to see that the patterns that you've created in your life are not serving you and have never served you. And that moving into this new space of possibilities and opportunities is where the real magic happens. But what say you? How do you feel about that? Do you think that this programming is good for you? Do you think it benefits you, or do you think it hurts you? You see, I had a viewer the other day say, well, I don't think all programming is bad. And my response is if someone's programming you, usually it's to their benefit. Wouldn't you rather program you to your benefit, or would you rather have somebody else program you to their benefit? The choice is yours, my friend. As always, if you enjoy this content, please like, share, and subscribe. I am truly grateful. And until I talk to you again, peace, love, light. I hope you have the most amazing day.